I start with these 10 questions I've been honing over the course of my career.
And I'm a big fan on probing for key business metrics. What metrics, what behaviors are going to shift?
I talk often about obsolescence, which always gets people's attention early on because they just think, well, what that video is going to look like 6 months, 18 months, 3 years, 4 years from now, and what we're going to tie to that video.
At least on the media production side. So what we've seen is our clients are a lot more confident on producing content now, and we're confident in their ability just because we know they have internal either subject matter experts or instructional designers that
Meaning is more important than visuals.
Hey everybody, Erick Prospero here with the Microlearning Lab. Today we're going to be talking with Chris Karel on best practices for microlearning video. Now, there are a few experts I follow in the e-learning space specifically on video, and Chris is actually one of them. You'll check out their site. They have a ton of resources on microlearning video production, video training content, and to be honest, it was one of the initial inspirations for how we structured a lot of our work. I don't know, Chris, can you tell us a little more about yourself, your experience in this space?
Sure. I started into instructional design and video production, mostly instructional design, the way a lot of people do is I didn't go to school for it. I did not grow up thinking I'm going to become an instructional designer someday. I was a teacher. My father was a teacher. I grew up watching that lifestyle. I loved it and had a change in both the economy and in my family where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and reskill, and got a degree in digital media and worked in like commercial video production and really kind of got to see how the sausage was made, to use that analogy. And during that time, I took a job at an agency where I was able to learn firsthand from somebody who was making the transition from video production as a house into 100% e-learning. And then from there, I started my own business in 2019, and I've been just trying to find ways to help people how to make better video and video that helps people learn. And that's really kind of how I ended up in this industry and how I'm doing what I'm doing today.
Awesome, Chris. Now, on this video, we're going to be discussing 5 top tips. We'll keep the content relatively simple. So, Chris, what's tip number 1? Because I'm not sure if this is the most important one.
So I tell everybody when you're getting started with any type of microlearning project or video project in general is you have to start with a needs analysis. Everybody who ever contacts me, whether they're client, customer, or somebody who's just like, where do I get started? I start with these 10 questions I've been honing over the course of my career, which is, why do we want to create it? Like, why are we trying to do this? Because some people go into this thing thinking, I just need a video. Like, everyone has video on their site. All I have is like pictures. And I'm like, that's not the best reason. Then figure out who the audience is, who their learners are. The third one is like, what do we want to accomplish? What do people want to learn from this? Why isn't the current method effective is the next one. And then what are the gaps in the learning? Present through like challenges that we're going to face. Oftentimes that challenge, especially in today's economy, is budget. How are we going to make this? What's it going to cost? How long will it take? And then we get into like, how's the training going to help their business? As what I've learned from going from a K-12 educator to a business video expert or business video provider is thinking first and foremost, how is this affecting the business overall? If we're training individuals inside the business, how are we going to help them skill up so that's going to help the business? Or if we're doing, learning content from a customer education standpoint, how are we going to help our customers understand our features and benefits of our products? Keeping that in mind is like number 7 in that needs analysis stage. Then we get into like timing things. When do we need it? How much money can we invest? What's our budget? And then what kind of training is going to help? Obviously, I'm a video guy, so I like to make video as much as I can. However, I've talked a lot of people out of making video, largely because it's too expensive, or sometimes people just have to read and some people don't want to hear that. It might be better to just put a visual up or put text up or an icon and let them read about something or listen. It doesn't necessarily need to be a full live action video.
No, that makes absolute sense. And I'm a big fan on probing for key business metrics. If your learners were to go through this content, what metrics, what behaviors are going to shift? And a lot of that's covered in different types of training needs analysis too. One of the challenges I have actually with customers is sometimes they don't have any data on it, right? They don't, for example, if it's a safety training video, They know they need safety training. They know it has to look and feel a certain way. But then when I ask them, okay, like, how are you guys tracking your current training, right? What is the impact that this is going to have tied to your customer base if they follow through on this one action? Love it. So big fan of training needs analysis as well. So what's tip number 2?
So tip number 2 is making sure once you've done that thorough analysis that you establish goals and objectives for your project. So goals being the broad, like we're going to accomplish X by, a certain time, and then diving down into objectives. AI has been really cool for this, creating some really cool smart tool generators that I've written about, where you can type in like what you want to accomplish and it just starts kicking out like, do you want to do this, this, and this? I'm like, man, this is amazing, because before I'm like, all right, what does SMART stand for again? I've done this so many times, but I have to remember what SMART stands for. I'm like, okay, it's not as important to remember that as much as like where that tool is, what I can link to. I've looked at 2 different ones that sort of help me create these SMART goals and SMART objectives for how we're going to accomplish what we want to accomplish. As you mentioned in the metrics thing, to sort of piggyback this number 2 for me is I'm always talking about, once we establish what our needs analysis is, what we're trying to accomplish, those metrics for how we're going to determine success is our next step. Because in the end, I talk often about obsolescence, which always gets people's attention early on, because they just think, well, all right, we're just going to make a video and it's all going to work out. Everyone's going to learn from it. And I'm like, well, we want to think about what that video is going to look like 6 months, 18 months, 3 years, 4 years from now, and what we're going to tie to that video and its result, or that course that we may put the video in. What metrics are we going to use to say, is it sales? Is it, retention of staff? Whatever the key metric is that we're going to use to try to improve, we have to use that same metric then when we're evaluating. And it's really hard to do that if you don't know what your goals and objectives are at the very beginning.
That's really interesting, actually. I'm curious about how you bring up obsolescence, just because to be honest with you, I've never touched on that on a consulting call. And it makes perfect sense too, because it's something that they should be considered, that they should be considering, because it's not like the learning asset's going to be effective or useful forever. So what are some of the questions you ask in that? Because this is helping me a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, growing up as the son of an English teacher and then being an English teacher myself, I just love the sound of the word obsolescence. It's just fun to sort of bring up. It has sort of this like mythic, scientific, sci-fi sort of feel to it. So that's the first thing. I remember it all the time. And I remember that, like, if we don't talk about obsolescence now, and my goal as a consultant or as somebody who makes learning video content for people is to have a relationship with those folks for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, which is something I learned early on at that agency I was at. Like, I'm trying to build lifetime value with a client, as opposed to try to make a video for X number of dollars and then say, deuces, we'll catch you later. Thanks for the money. And so obsolescence not only helps the client think about what's this going to do in the future. If it's time-based in terms of like, we're just trying to upskill to a specific thing in an organization, time is really going to be, it's going to figure out that's going to be easy. Like the obsolescence will be 6 months to a year, but that sort of happens in that design document phase during instructional design of like planning out, like, what are we going to do with this by when? So it is a part of the second step of the process after we've done a needs analysis and we start to lay out a design document, either for the course or the video or the program that we're making. Further down the line in my template for design document is, what are we going to do with this after we reach objectives or we don't meet objectives? 1, to measure success. 2, to see whether or not people are doing it, usually is the number one people ask, like, can we measure whether or not people are doing this? And then the second one is, or the third one is to find out, do we need to update it? Has something changed, And that's usually dictated by the content more than anything, Eric.
That makes perfect sense. I know we have check-ins on a quarterly basis with our customers to see the key metrics that we initially planned for. But when you brought up obsolescence, I was thinking more in terms of design too, right? The first thing that came to mind was the use of stock footage. A lot of times our clients will reach out to us and they're trying to produce a video and they want to go with the cheaper option that leverages stock. And the issue is, a lot of stock libraries have I mean, it's accessible media. It looks good enough, but it really impacts the design obsolescence, right? It's this video is going to age a lot faster because it just looks, I mean, it looks very timely now, but because it has maybe there's a lot more actors, or you see people, you can see the suit that looks slightly dated a bit more.
Yep. Yeah, I will tell you that reason alone, the majority of people that I work with, I do most things with animations, photos, and illustrations than I do with live actors anymore. Number one, it's way more evergreen, like using illustrated things, or I like to use like a virtual training persona inside of a course or inside of a video, which is just a character that can pop up. It's really easy to swap that. It's really easy to change the voice on that than it is to have a real person. And I know my acting talent folks or voice talent people will be cringing at that statement, but it's the reality. When you're making training, it's an investment for sure, especially if you're making something rather large, and it's probably going to get customized or altered in the future. It's very hard to go back and do that with the original stuff. And when it comes to stock, there's amazing stock libraries out there, but you're right, like, what was fashionable a month ago may look really weird in 3 months,
Yeah,
depending on
and the good stuff is expensive. I mean,
without a doubt.
I mean, there's a cheaper stock which is accessible, but then like the Adobe Premium, Shutterstock Premium stuff, like you're talking $40-50 a clip.
Yep.
And that's interesting that you bring up avatars, because we have customers that love illustrations, that love the use of character-driven narratives, but they're hesitant because they're worried it's going to feel a bit cartoony. And I'll include a link in the description on this, but we recently started playing around with a software called Mars. It's Monsters, Aliens, Robots, Zombies, and it allows you to edit live action video. Edit what's being said on live action video using their voice. So let's pretend we have a host slide video, right? Raphael's talking about safety concepts, and maybe there's a phrase that has to change. So with this software, you would run his voice through 11 laps and imitate his voice, so you can basically duplicate it. And the AI software, Mars, aligns his lips to the voice you're swapping out. So it's pretty cool. We've used it before for localization as well. So we can take your voice, put it into Spanish, and then have, it's like 90-80% there with the lip sync too.
Today, we are going to learn to count the Say 10 way and practice adding numbers. Are you ready? Let's go. Hoy vamos a aprender a contar, diciendo 10 y a practicar la suma de números. ¿Estás preparado? Vamos. Heute lernen wir das Zählen in 10er-Schritten und das Addieren von Zahlen. Bist du bereit? Los geht's.
You don't want it to look like one of those the kung fu movies from back in the day, right?
Yeah.
It's going to look a little
more
tacky.
Scarier. There's some of the AI live action stuff that I've watched now, like it's like stuff that was in a sci-fi movie, like, sci-fi horror, not sci-fi fantasy, but like horror, because like, all right, this person's obviously not real, and there's a lot of those out there, but I think you're 100% right where you're matching the lip sounds, which is also the hardest thing if you've done animation. Like, I got trained how to do cell animation at one point in time, and I'm like, man, the painstaking effort you went through just to change all of those different syllabic spots just to make that fake character work. Now we're into like making real people do that, and I'm like, I'm like, yeah, I don't see it yet. I'm not ready to like tell any client yet. But some people are like, I'm good with it, in short amounts, like, let's just do it. And I'm like, okay.
I 100% agree. Like for example, Synthesia, I might be getting the name wrong, or it's where it's the robotic person and it's obvious, right? I compare it to voiceover, like the robot voiceover 5 years ago, where you played robot. It was terrible, right? It was more of a distraction than anything. But the cool thing about the Mars software is you're using a live action video, and yet there is a slight misalignment for the portion you're updating. But overall, it worked pretty well. I think we're on tip number 3, right?
Yes. So my next thing when it comes to making video content, especially learning video content, I tell everybody who I teach, if I'm teaching them how to make it themselves, or I use it with my clients and I don't necessarily say this is what we're going to do, but that is to use a formula, right? So we know that certain types of videos, certain types of videos are better suited for helping people learn things. My best piece of performing content on my blog post since I started my business in 2019 is the 6 types of learning video.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I know with some of our customer base, sometimes they get a little too creative, and that could be a challenge in terms of execution. Not only that, if you're dealing with subject matter experts where they don't know what a video script is, or they don't know what the ideal flow is, this really creates certain categories they can follow. So typically what we would do is just give them a series of options, right? We have more didactic videos, we have a process video, and this is a menu that you can choose from for all of these topics, and then just rinse and repeat.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really helpful in talking to somebody who doesn't know anything about scripting to just everyone really understands ABC, 1, 2, 3, 3-act structure. Everybody has consumed some type of media, whether it is reading or watching a show or seeing a play. We understand sort of that first, second, third, that ABC. And most formulas that I use, with the exception of a lecture style where if I'm just doing some type of instruction direct to camera, most of them follow sort of that first, second, and third format. And so it's really important for people to see that. Otherwise you end up in, well, I really want to do this. And I'm like, we can do that. This is what it's going to cost to do that. And then I ask, well, why do you want to accomplish that? And most of the times it's because, well, I saw this on Apple Plus, or on Apple TV, or I saw this on some trailer that opened a show I was watching on Netflix. And I'm like, gotta remember that those are designed for entertainment. They're not helping you learn. So again, we're back to creating too much dissonance by throwing in buzzes and features and things that look really cool. They're amazing. Don't get me wrong. I love that stuff. But if it's taken away from what I'm trying to learn, it's going to be frustrating, not to mention expensive. So
this might be a whole wormhole on itself in terms of topics, but it's funny how there isn't really an industry standard on how to categorize things. I've seen different, even for animation, there's a ton of different labels for the types of animation, but at the end of the day, if you have a simple label that everyone understands, I guess it just makes it easy for them to follow along, right? Like a how-to video, a process video. And what's great about this too is ChatGPT and Gemini, they know those formats very well, right? They can suggest a few formats. So in the past, we have invested in script templates, but now we're really trying to dive into more prompt-oriented lead magnets or tools.
Yeah, and I have found as I've pushed myself to learn as much about AI and generative AI specifically, that the formula, being able to have access to these 5 or 6 formulas and say, we're going to go down this path, that's all in an LLM now. And so you can just say, I want to write this in the style of this particular formula. Here's what I want it to, here is the formula. Or if it's connected like 4.0 or, ChatGPT 4.0 that's connected to the internet, you can get it to reference something and pull something from it if you engineer your prompt the right way in order to kick it back out. Because I feel like that's where we're heading anyways. Like script writing, the way I've taught it in the past or the way I have done it in the past is going to be forever changed.
It's been amazing for, at least on the media production side. So what we've seen is our clients are a lot more confident on producing content now. And we're confident in their ability just because we know that they have internal either subject matter experts or instructional designers that can use it good enough for us to start working with something from there. So it's making a lot more things efficient. But all right, let's jump into tip number 4.
Sure. Number 4, as we progress through from needs analysis and goals and objectives, and then using templates or script formulas, is more of a mental one. And I call this the VFL way. Video for learning is the thing that I've been talking about since I got into this world. And the VFL way is really 3 things. It starts with a mentality of done is better than perfect. The second one is meaning is more important than the visuals. And then the third one is process. And so when I talk about the VFL way and getting either a client or a scholar of mine in one of my programs to understand the VFL way, we have to focus on it. At some point in time, we're going to have to push the go button, and that done is better than perfect. That doesn't mean that it can be sloppy garbage that just like I whip out and make little fun TikTok videos about condiments, and I do those in one take, and they're not perfect. But that purpose is social media for entertainment. It's not to help people learn. But I'm going to follow a process, which is that third part, that's going to help me reach a done is better than perfect. And then when we get to the meaning over visuals, this is where it goes back to what we already talked about, Eric, in relation to some people want, an animated opener, or they want visuals that they saw on Netflix or on a Hulu show, and have to explain and go back to the fact that, like, what is it going to mean for the learner to see that? Like, do we want them just sitting there passively watching and thinking, oh, I should be in my sweatpants and eating popcorn watching this? Or do I want to think like, I need to learn from this, so I need to pay attention? So meaning is more important than visuals. That doesn't mean you can't spice a thing up with a visual every now and then and really grab people's attention with something that's eye-catching or something that feels cool in terms of the way it's animated. But if it doesn't help reach the meaning that's tied back to the business objectives, then we're failing. And then the process, which we've talked about this, is I like to have a linear process for everything I do in a production standpoint. And that process is repeatable. For me, I've been doing this for 15 years at this point. I know the process from start to finish. I don't even need to consult it anymore. But when you're getting started or you're talking to a client, we have to talk about process because it's really important.
My account managers are going to love this because we don't do a good job at saying no to a lot of things, unfortunately. And I would even say sometimes it doesn't even help our customers, because when we make that adjustment to the change, it pushes something back because there was like a fourth quarter character adjustment that they wanted to make in an entire series. And it's one of the biggest challenges we have on, hey, look, we had your initial buy-in on this aesthetic, this concept, but what do you do to convince your client after a series of approvals, or even not even your client, just any stakeholder, that, hey, look, or done is better than perfect, right? How do we get this? How do we launch this and get feedback on it so we can see if it's even effective and go from there?
I think there's two things I'm hearing in what you asked me, and one of them is about scope and scope creep, and that, people who are used to getting what they want and making changes whenever they want really need a firm process that says, we want to give you what you want, but understand that it's time, attention, and cost that requires those things to be paid for in a certain way. And we can always add to something, there's no doubt, but we have a scope, we have a budget, and if it's going to exceed that, it's my job as the project manager to tell you that. Like, not just say, yes, I'm happy to help you. Because I say, yes, I'm happy to help you, but let's talk about what that looks like. And I always start by going back to saying, like, is this going to help somebody learn something? Because if we're going to make a change or we're going to add something to it, and they say, like, oh my gosh, it's so important, I totally forgot this whole thing about substrates. Okay, well, then we need to retool, right? No doubt about it. But that may also cost something because you didn't bring it up earlier in the process. And that's a really uncomfortable conversation. A lot of young project managers or account managers don't like to have that conversation. I think that's one of the things that's allowed me to be in the business as long as I have, because I say it how it is. I'm like, hey, Eric, we can do that. It's going to cost another $2,000. Like, right out of the gate, I'm really good at ballparking. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I said, if you think it's going to find value, I'd like to go back at our design document, see where we failed you, because I take it on me. Like, if this was supposed to be something we learned, then I failed to find this. But if that's the case, then let's look and see what it's going to take. If it costs more, we're going to have to ask for more, So that's part of it. There was a second thing in there too, in terms of, like, how do you tell a person, like, we got to move forward? I think then that becomes, again, a little more internal for me in saying, like, all right, done is better than perfect for sure, but I need to also trust that I've done the work in managing this situation to a point of deliverable that I can comfortably say, this is going to be great because I've made sure with my team that it's going to be great and we've done the things. Otherwise, I'm being dishonest to the client. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just sort of mailing it in, and we are all guilty of that in our professions at different times of just like, I'm just going through the motions. And if I have, I will own it and just say like, look, I missed this somewhere. I'll just eat it. Let's fix it, you know? But more often than not, like I stay attached and make sure that people understand done is going to be better than perfect. We'll be able to fix it later, but right now we need to get this out there. I think it's going to help people learn, and this is where we've headed. This is what we've planned on for weeks or months or however much time it's been, and sort of lands in that spot.
Yeah, that makes sense. One big approach that we take is let's get it out there, let's test its effectiveness and make decisions on changing based off that data. What's tip number 5?
So the last tip I have is to use a scorecard. I used to call it a rubric. I come from K-12 education, used to say use a rubric to evaluate how you're doing. I've been working in the manufacturing sector here for a while and changed from academic to corporate, which I've been in for quite a while anyways, but realizing most people don't know what a rubric is. And I realized like, well, everybody knows what a rubric is. I'm like, oh, that's the teacher self. That's your masters of education talking. It's not normal people in normal lives using rubrics. So this is what I call my learning video scorecard. And basically it has 5 sections. It gives you an opportunity to rate how you did after a video has been made on its purpose, its type, its content. And there's a way to sort of apply a numbered score to it, like how it, you know, are the facts and information current and up to date? We give that a score from 1 to 5. We do that for all of these categories, including technical. And then on the page 2, there's a section about, you know, or it finishes the technical and you get to add it all up. And then from here, I found that if we can determine whether or not the video is ineffective, needs improvement, or is effective, we can sort of reach a point where we can say to people, I've made an effective video. You know, I use this with my teams that help make content for me. They're aware of this. Like I use this during reviews and sort of say like, hey, you know, the edit's really well organized. There's a variety of camera angles or cuts, but we're missing overlays. Like there's no text to help people understand what's going on here, which that's because I've internalized this scorecard. So like that would be like a 3 or a 4 as an edit. But now we add a couple of text overlays, we boosted that to a 5. So this becomes like the how do we keep score in our head as professionals? But then if we're learning as an individual, I don't necessarily recommend the scorecard be something I would walk through with a client. This is more of an internal team tool, but like if you're making microlearning or making video productions, having a scorecard to use if you're new to it is really important. But also if you're a skilled professional, understanding what these things are and being able to say like, okay, I didn't give them the right file size or the right format or the right aspect. So I failed a little bit on my distribution. And by failed a little bit, I mean like, okay, I got a 3 or a 4. I still outputted a great product, but that's a place for improvement, you know, and that's something I can use to focus on the future. So I always tell individuals that are working in this world, having some type of scorecard that you use as a physical tool that you could then become an internalized thing when you're making something super important to being successful.
No, that's definitely effective on the production side too, right? If you can coach your project managers to be a lot more focused on, hey, was this actually doing what it was supposed to do, right? And it does get a little tricky when you're measuring learner behavior after the fact, but that's a simple survey, or at least you can plan that into the design of the learning, right? If you focus on what behaviors you're shifting from the beginning, you can definitely plan for that. But awesome, Chris. I love the content. In the description of this video, guys, we're going to include a lot of description links to some of the resources on Chris's blog. I've been following this content for a bit. Some of the best e-learning video tools out there, and we'll include it in the description. Is there any other way for them to reach out to you, Chris?
Yeah, you can email me. What you can put in the description, chris@learningcarton.com is my email address. I always tell people to DM me directly. I always, as an individual consultant, I offer like free discoveries to like hop on a call, just like we're having here in this talk, to talk through what people want to accomplish. I don't charge for that. And I should say, connect with me on LinkedIn. I do post on LinkedIn a lot. It is the one social media I live on. Maybe my second social media to TikTok. I'm a bit obsessed with TikTok, but that's not a professional space for me, as much as I've tried to make it.
I am curious, before we wrap up, do you think it's useful for posting content there for e-learning in general?
I don't think so. I tried to go down the path just because I thought the platform was super exciting. I liked the openness of it. I liked the, what it really did for me was gave me this access to primary source information like no other social media did. You know, if something would happen nationally or globally, I could hear from people right in that spot. And then the creativity of the people who are on there, I found unparalleled to other places. The people who are successful on TikTok, they're following the trends, they're making content that's entertaining, and it gets back to my previous thing is like, I think TikTok is more of an entertainment space, and it really gets people engaged in that way, as well as there's current events and other things that they're music, entertainment stuff, but from like, do people go to TikTok to learn? I think they're trying to make that happen, but I also don't know if the format is really suited other than learning about something like awareness raising, you know?
A quick recipe or something.
Yeah, or something like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. I should go learn more about that. I've never gone to like a TikTok and like, now I'm gonna go read more about that. Or I'm sorry, that I learned all I need to learn about that. I'm more often like, I should probably go find this. Does this person have a YouTube channel where they've talked about it for 10, 15 minutes? Do you know what I mean? Like, in order to learn something, I think I definitely get knowledge from there or current events or things that are happening, which I find incredibly valuable to me, but I don't know from a training and learning perspective, it's the tool that I want it to be. Now, someone might prove me wrong. I still think that vertical video is more an entertainment space than it is a learning space. Not solely. It still can be great for awareness and creating interest in something, but like if I really need to learn how to do something skill-based, it's probably not going to be from a vertical video, more than likely.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah.
So Chris, I definitely appreciate the time. I may or may not post your TikTok account in the bio as well, or the description. So we'll see if that happens. See if we can find it. But thanks everybody, I appreciate it. And have a nice day, Chris.
All right, thanks, Eric.
Curious about building your own micro-learning like this? We've got your back. Click the video cards for step-by-step videos, subscribe for weekly tips, and check the description for a curated list of resources to kickstart your journey.